So it's also helping us have a plan where we don't, cram for the test the night before, so to speak, where we're trying to do it all at the very, very end.
Hi, I'm Russ.
And I'm Danny.
And this is the Memory Makers Podcast,
the show that helps you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories.
We're going to Memory Makers Podcast all day long. We're going to Memory Maker Podcast. Anyway, you get it.
I mean, you can keep going if you want to.
I can only force those words into that cadence so well, but that's kind of how my day is. It's like, we're going to rock all day long. Like, we're just getting after it today, man.
I like it. I don't think anyone's going to be upset about that. That's a fun song.
It's if you got a problem with it, we got to have a bigger discussion. So
we're going to have words.
Who hurt you?
today's topic, we're just going to get right into it, is related to goals, because every business owner, every leader, every manager, every employee, everyone has goals, right? But identifying and having a goal isn't enough. We have to do the work to make that goal a reality, to get to that finish line. And today I'm going to review a framework to help you actually make progress toward your goals, and it's called the DOORS framework. DOORS. It's an acronym. So we're going to go through this letter by letter. It's an acronym.
It's an acronym.
And explain what this is and how you can put your own goals into this framework to increase the likelihood that you will make progress and get to that finish line that you're going toward.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one on here of DOORS is D, which stands for definition. We want to define exactly what success looks like. And one of the things that can be really helpful here is to create what this framework, by the way, comes from Brendon Burchard, who is an author of 5 or 6 New York Times bestsellers, and he's a big high performance coach. And one of the things he talks about is create a scene of victory, like a mental movie for the goal. Describe and imagine exactly what it will look like, what it will feel like, what it will sound like, all those senses when you achieve the big goal. And here it's really important to be specific. Because if you have a goal that says, oh, well, I want to increase profit this year, it's not a helpful definition, because if you make $1 more in profit than you did the year before, technically you achieved that goal because you increased profit. We want to get way more specific with what this looks like. So this might be a better version of that. Obviously, put this into whatever context makes sense for your particular goal, but you might say at the end of the year, we will achieve $5 million in gross revenue with $800,000 in net profit. That's certainly much more specific, and you know when you've achieved that. And not only do you want to get really clear on what it will, on what the specific goal is, but kind of create that scene of what will it look like, what will it feel like, what will it sound like to achieve that goal. This is an important step, because when you have a very, very clear vision of where you're going, and that vision gets you excited, it's way easier to stay on track and do the work, especially on the days where you don't feel like doing the work. That clarity and that vision are really important to be able to drive us forward to get to that point. So that's the first one, D for definition.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that having that emotional connection to what the outcome is, not only what's it going to look like and feel like and sound like for you, but for other members on the team or for the guests, because it gives you that emotional North Star. It also hijacks your brain wiring again to make it a little bit easier. So it's a little mental biohack. So D for definition. Then we go into the first O for outcomes. So once you have the definition and the picture of this end goal, now we need to look at these mid-process outcomes, right? Or the benchmarks or the milestones that are going to help us get to that end goal. This, in my opinion, I love that he draws attention to this, because similarly to, you need an emotional vision of what this is going to look like at the end of the day. We also need to be positively reinforced as we go through the process, right? Typically, when we're implementing something new or we're taking on a new challenge, it has its own curveballs and other things that we'll get into. But we need to make sure that we are thinking about, okay, well, how do I eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time, right? So these outcomes are those one bite at a time kind of pieces that we have to start looking at. And so if you've got an annual goal defined, the outcomes may be monthly or quarterly milestones. It may be, hey, by these dates, we need to have, phase 1 done. What does phase 1 look like? Okay. And then how do we start to deconstruct the spring roll to give us a path forward so we can take just next logical steps, but also have a good understanding of where we're trying to get to so we don't drift. And so if you only think about that end goal, it can feel really daunting, or it's like, oh, okay, that's too far away. We're not going to then take the intentional next steps that we need to, or we haven't thought about it. And so we're just more easily derailed as we go through a process if we're not thinking about what are these outcomes or benchmarks or milestones that naturally have to also come along. So if it's something, hey, this is an 18-month project. What are we doing by month 1? What are we doing by month 2? What are our fallbacks in case those need to adjust? Because then if things come down the pike that we're not expecting, we have a way to pivot and adjust and overcome and improvise if we need to. But we have that our sanity and our immediate gratification is better. That itch is better scratched, right? If we can see our progress as we go and we see it snowballing, and that way it just all feels more comprehensive as we're going through the process and in the trenches on that. So, and Danny, this is a great example for, a gentleman such as yourself who's climbed a Mount Kilimanjaro. If you think about this 1 week trek to climb a mountain and you're only focused on reaching the very top of it, then you're missing out on being able to make sure all of those sub-steps are where they need to be, right? That summit is the end goal, but you have to have a plan of how far are we going on day 1? How far are we going on day 2? How far are we going on day 3? What are things that are going to be a part of that that we need to be set up for success? Oh, okay, we're going to need to have some water gear because day 1 goes through this, we're swimming in a river basically, but then, it's just thinking of how are we going to need these tools and what elements are going to need to be in place as we go.
And to take that one step further of the mountain analogy is, let's say it's a 1 week trek to get to the top of a mountain. Identifying where you're going to stop every day and which camps you're going to be at throughout the process is helpful, because if you only look at the end goal, you may not realize you're not making enough progress on days 1 through 5. And then days 6 and 7, you have to do way too much, way more than you should in order to reach that goal. So it's also helping us have a plan where we don't, cram for the test the night before, so to speak. We're trying to do all at the very, very end.
Yeah.
So the second O stands for obstacles. Now, this is where you want to identify the things that will get in the way of you achieving the outcomes. These are the obstacles. There's another way to think about this, and it's something called a pre-mortem. We've all probably heard of the phrase when it comes to working on a project or working toward a goal of a post-mortem. That's where after something is done, you can review back through that project to see what went well, what did not go well, did you make the goal, did you not make the goal, why, and analyzing it after the fact. A pre-mortem allows you to rehearse this ahead of time. So if you have an annual goal, pre-mortem is essentially this. Imagine you get to the end of the year and you did not reach your goal. Ask yourself why. What happened? And then start writing out or typing out or whatever, all the answers that come to your mind of everything that, if you imagine yourself a year from now and you did not get to that goal, what are the reasons you did not get there? And just start listing them all out. And what you're going to find is that all of those pieces that you've identified, you now know, well, those are the obstacles. I can identify now what are the obstacles that are going to get in my way because I've rehearsed what failure looks like. So now that you know what those obstacles are, you can make sure to avoid those obstacles. And that is exactly where the next letter in this framework comes in, which I'm going to throw back to Russ for the next part of this.
Yeah, the R that we get to, R for Russ, or in this analogy or acronym, is rhythm. And so the rhythms are going to be, how are we giving ourselves protected regular time to be working on this or reviewing progress with key decision makers or delegated team members? And so these are the things that you do in order to avoid obstacles, to make sure, like Danny said, hey, are we seeing enough regular progress on day one so that way when it comes to day 6 on this climb that we're not trying to do twice as much work in half the time? And so as you consider some of these, these goals are important, but if we don't schedule time every day to have some focused, inspecting what we're expecting from team members or doing that legwork that we have on our own plate for it, then, if we kick that can down the road or, oh, okay, I can get to it, then you're deprioritizing the significance of that and you're setting yourself up for issues where if I know, hey, this is going to be something for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to need 3 days out of that week where I have a couple hours each of those days to have heads down focused on that to either do additional research or help other people overcome these things. And so if you consider some examples of possible goals and outcomes and why the rhythm is important, like if you have a certain number of corporate parties that you want to book, but you're not having heads down time dedicated towards reaching out to those on those calls every day, then you're not going to see the growth, right? It's that numbers game of, we know we're going to have to do 4 to 10 times the amount of outreach based on what our typical conversion is on booking. Or if we're trying something new, we also need to factor in some time around that, in that rhythm of, hey, there are going to be some unknowns and that we're going to come across and we're going to have to pivot around those. So I need to give myself some more time up front to get through some of those unknowns. If you have a training program or something that you want to create, it won't happen unless you're building that content on a regular basis and having heads down to documenting those things and pulling examples. And, we've talked in a previous episode about training documentation and how you do those processes. Like, it takes legwork on a regular basis to slowly curate that, but it all snowballs. And if you want to gain a certain number of followers on social media, it's not going to happen without you putting out consistent content and evaluating how is that responding to the market and how do we then make tweaks and changes to that to get better responses or find different topics that are more engaging with our core audience. So ultimately, the rhythm comes down, in my mind, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And that rhythm is the consistent plan that you do in order to make sure that wish actually comes to reality.
Yeah, and looking at that, the obstacles and the rhythm go hand in hand so much, because when you do that obstacle piece, I'm going to rewind a little bit here, but when you do the obstacles, you're going to find that some of them are external, but some are going to be internal, right? We've all been in situations where we recognize, well, yeah, there's this thing I need to work on, but I know I get distracted by these shiny objects over here, or I get distracted by my inbox, or I get distracted by social media, or I get, in the weeds and work that I maybe shouldn't be doing, and I'm avoiding this bigger project that I know I should, right? Some of that is internal, and some of them are going to be external pieces, whether that is related to the fires that are going to come up on a regular basis, the questions that we're going to ask, the things that are happening within our market or our customers or anybody else. And so there's that internal and external piece. And when you can have the rhythms set up to make sure that you don't get caught in a bad situation where those obstacles take over, that's going to be helpful. And so the final letter here is S, and this is for social. And this is all about community and accountability. And there's this line that I love from Brendon Burchard, and he says, too many people strive in silence, which means they suffer in silence too. And they suffer in silence when they aren't making progress, because they have maybe these big goals and these big dreams and these big things they're working toward, but they don't tell anybody about it, whether that is a peer or whether that is people on their management team or other staff members or anybody else. They have them in their head and they try to work on them alone and they try to strive toward them alone. And they get to a point where they're not making progress, maybe because obstacles have come up, maybe because they haven't identified the right outcomes along the way, maybe because they don't have the rhythms in place. But they don't have anyone to lean on for help. They don't have anybody to hold them accountable. So the social side of this is asking yourself, who are you surrounding yourself with? Because I think it's important to surround yourself with other people who are also working on big goals and who hold each other accountable. Because what I found, which is super interesting, when we make a promise to another person, we tend to hold that more sacred than a promise that we make to ourselves. And so we don't have to try to do this alone. We can work with other people, get an accountability buddy, find a friend in the industry that you can check in with once a week, once every other week, and ask each other, did you do the thing that you said you were going to do? If you didn't, why not? So that you can make progress toward these big goals that you want to achieve. And so when we zoom out and we look at this, this is the DOORS framework. It's defining what success looks like and getting a really clear picture of it. It is looking at the outcomes and the milestones along the way. It's identifying the obstacles that are going to come up and cause us distraction or pain or things throughout that process, identifying the rhythms we need to do every day, every week, and every month to get there, and then having the social accountability built in to make sure that we can achieve that goal. And that's what the DOORS framework is all about.
Boom. Close the door on that one. It's done and done, friend. How about that?
I like close the door. I like what you did there.
Or open the door to new possibilities, whichever one you want. That's like glass half full, glass half empty, either way. Or you can do a pocket door and just slide that bad boy right open, whatever you want.
I want to do parlor doors that do one of these things, like from an old Western saloon.
You've been reading Era 2 of Mistborn too much for that. I know where that's coming from. Anyway, deep nerd rabbit hole. I love the concept. I think, so much of what we try to do in these episodes is, hey, these are solid frameworks that just help demystify and give us a tangible tactical approach that we can start wrapping our arms around it. And I love this concept. I think it's a great one. So with that, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. And so we'll be having more awesome content coming your guys' way through the weekly episodes. So be sure to come back again and hear from our guests and operators and partners and everybody else that's been such a great part of this fabulous experiment we've been doing.
If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, please.
We always appreciate the 5 stars if you can manage. And thank you very, very much to Mikey Mike for working the 1s and 2s. And thank you all for joining us. If you have ideas for future episodes, be sure to hit us up on social media, direct message us, and we'll get after it for you. But until then, we will catch you on the next one, Troublemakers. Let's go!
Let me make sure I got my mic settings correct. Yes.
I should have looked up Doors songs, like The Doors, and picked one of those for the jingle. That's a musical group. I'm pretty sure that they have songs they could have done for that. But either way. All right, thumbnails. I'm trying to open a door, but I always try to make mine moving. Moving GIFs, Mike. We need those. Can you move your camera and peek your head around the door to your office?
Ready?
It's good for the blooper reel regardless. It was
all
good.
Right.
You were just so excited. That's it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Scene.